Ich hatte mit den multiplen Persönlichkeiten angefangen und zwei Ihnen schon benannt. I started to tell you that I'm here in multiple personalities, and two we had already. Freunde des Reiff and assistant. But more than that, of course, most of you know, I am also the student of Michael Jansen, who was very important for me. And I think the German word actually means it best to say, ich bin ein Schüler von Michael Jansen und ich bin froh, dass ich ein Schüler sein durfte. It was in 1998 that I was in the first seminar with him on the Indian Ocean, the discovery of the sea route to India, which actually is something which from then on was the ongoing trend. I was able to learn from him, and he was already on the track, of course, way ahead, but I was very glad to be able to follow. And learned a lot in there, and I'm very glad about it. Ich bin sehr froh, dass ich so viel mitnehmen konnte, und ich hoffe, jetzt gerichtet an alle Studierenden, die hier sind, dass sie auch solche Lehrer finden, die sie weiter begleiten, auch wenn der Michael Jansen das jetzt nicht mehr ganz aktiv, sondern nur noch passiv wird tun können. And last personality, maybe stratum, because we are looking into stratigraphies today, is that I'm very glad that we have a friendship together. Since this year's a developing friendship, and something I'm very happy about and very proud about, that we have it, and sharing a lot of very nice memories, and hopefully a lot of more memories to come. And there is, when we were bathing at midnight at RWTH with the marine fluorescence, das Meeresleuchten, which we had. Or Junie, you will remember singing Christmas songs in Kabul, in a locked up house, which we were not allowed to leave. So a lot of nice memories, and I'm hoping that this final lecture is also another start for something very new, and I'm very much interested and hoping for what is going to be there. Michael, vielen, vielen Dank für eine ganz tolle Zeit bislang und hoffentlich noch viel weitere tolle Zeit.
Ja, verstehe ich jetzt. Und normalerweise, wenn man gelobt wird, muss man sehr vorsichtig sein. Wenn es nicht der Karsten wäre, der dieses Lob ausgesprochen hätte, wäre ich jetzt etwas kritisch. So one has to be very careful if one is praised, because there might be something else behind. And as it was Karsten, I can trust him. As for me, it's a very, very important moment. And I remember 1968 when I started studying here. It was those days when the students got up, famous as the Roaring 68, and I remember these, if they were Elgin marbles, we would be very rich. Unfortunately, it's only a copy, but they were hanging already 40 years ago here, and it's the same hall in which I had my first lectures, and the same chairs, and I would have liked not to have a beamer, but to have slide projectors. I have 50,000 slides at home, but nobody has a projector anymore. So it was a lot of work to transfer my transparency memory into a digital one. And you saw already what problems we have in getting this machine running, and I hope it will be working. All of you have somehow and somewhere connections to me, and we come to Stratographies of Mind, a title which I selected purposely course, on the one side, the physical remains we have in archaeology and, of course, in geology, the stratification of events, and there is the terminus, post, and antequem. Normally, the pieces on top are younger than the ones below. And I found with Freud a statement: the psychoanalyst, like the archaeologist, must uncover layer after layer of the patient's psyche before coming to the deepest, most valuable treasures. And I thought of it, and I found that, of course, my life exists and is consisting of many, many layers, which I want to share with you today. And one of my layers, my strata, somehow is something similar like yours, because we are all here, and I'm very thankful for that. I start with a comment on the famous archaeologist Colin Renfrew, who in 1982 gave his inaugural dissertation with the topic Thoughts in Archaeology of Mind. And it is written, all that man in ancient times have made and left behind them is the farrago of our study. From an introductory lecture on archaeology delivered before the University of Cambridge, and this is where it's coming from. Each age and every society has its own image of the human past, an image which shapes its attitude to the present and governs the nature of what is seen to be possible and appropriate action in the world. In most societies, that image has been part of the received wisdom in the form of a creation myth, a cosmogony. In our own day, we have had the task of formulating our own cosmology and our own geology, our own biology and our image of man. But as Ernst Cassirer puts it, we cannot define man by any inherent principle which constitutes his metaphysical essence, nor can we define him by any inborn faculty or instinct that may be ascertained by empirical observation. Man's outstanding characteristic, his distinguishing mark, is not his metaphysical or physical nature, but his work. In this work, it is the system of human activities which defines and determines the circle of humanity. I remember 1979. We had the big pleasure and luck to have received a large research project from Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft to work in Mohenjo-Daro in Pakistan. And we had the big pleasure of Günter Orban, who is here present, to be the director of this project, and we had 10 years working in Mohenjo-Daro. This is the beach of Goa. After the first season of more than 4 months in tents, without liquor, without entertainment, every evening, 6 o'clock, it's getting dark, and at 8 o'clock you get nervous, you want to do something to be entertained, but there was no entertainment. We were sitting with the jokidars, the night watchmen, and the campfires, and tried to calm down. Normally it takes about 4 weeks when you work in the desert till you have overcome this hectic life of Western society. But then during Christmas time we decided to have a break, and I say, see Mr. von Wyczyński, Che, our old friend, who was with us in those days, we decided to go to Goa, and after 2 months work in Pakistan, we arrived in Goa in the night. The night was warm, the water was warm. We were swimming naked, drinking a beer and enjoying life. It was wonderful. And these 2 weeks we recovered again to be able to continue our work in Mohenjo-Daro. And then we went to Old Goa, and I saw the church of Bom Jesus, which was built in 1596 by the Jesuits. And you may know that in 1497 Vasco da Gama discovered the sea route to India, and from then on the Western colonial influence spread all over the South Indian continent up to China. And I was sitting in front of this church, a wonderful Baroque facade, and I thought, how is it possible that such a church is built 18,000 kilometers by boat away from Italy, from Central Europe, if you take the sea route along Africa. And we speculated, how did this knowledge travel? And I had one of my PhD students who worked on this, and we have no architect known who built this church. And then I came across the idea it might be another communication which made this wonderful architecture possible. And of course it was in the 40th of the 15th century that Gutenberg invented the printing of movable letters, which was the beginning of distribution of knowledge through books. And here we have, of course, in the 16th century, Serlio and other famous writers whose books, since the middle of the 16th century, traveled all over the world. And since then, you found a kind of first global architecture of the Baroque facades of the Jesuits from Southeast Asia up to Middle America. So this was a big, big jump in technology, that through the dissemination of knowledge through books, a new world started, and since then books are a very, very important part of our communication system. I remember 3 years ago we were in the Himalayas with Arte, where we made a film on the Indus and also on Mohenjo-Daro, and I was staying in the Karakoram, far away from any communication, and I just received a phone call on my mobile, and my secretary asked me if he should pay this or this or this. And I remember 20 years ago in Mohenjo-Daro to do one phone call. It took us a day. We had to travel to the post office. In the post office they had a machine like that, and I had a chance 3 minutes to talk with my beloved in Europe. What I want to say is that we are at the edge of an enormous change of communication from the book tradition, which started in the 16th, to a new world which hardly is to be understood. So communication is one essential part of behavior of mankind. And here we are in the Indus Valley, and we had to go back after Christmas to the desert. And here you see seals of the Indus Valley civilization. And the third millennium is known for an enormous revolution, namely of the development of writing in Mesopotamia, in Egypt, and in the Indus Valley. And this must have been an enormous change, where society is completely developed in a new vision, as was in the 16th century with the books, as will be in the future with new communication systems of our electronic data, communication, and whatever it is. So we had the chance and the pleasure to work in an area which is fascinatingly interesting, where for the first time in this long development of mankind, more than 3 million years, where people were roaming around, collecting food, hunting, suddenly, or rather suddenly, settled down in the Neolithic, what Verborn Child called the Neolithic Revolution, where the first architecture starts, the first villages are formed, and where, through extension of far distance trade, the first cities appear. And I want here, at this case, especially welcome all my colleagues. We had 2 days now, a wonderful workshop with, I must say, the best people of the world, from America to Italy, from Harvard to New York to Heidelberg to Rome, and whatever is to India, Pakistan, where we were discussing these phenomena of the development of the third millennium. And it is the first time that where we are living in today has been formed in those days. The complexity of society, the conception of communication, the transport systems over long distances, trading or whatever it is, happened in those days, and we had the chance to work for more than 10 years. And Mohenjo-Daro, can we take off the light or can we make that a little bit darker? You see the Indus here. We are in northwest India, today Pakistan, and Mohenjo-Daro is here in the middle of the alluvial plains. And of course, we had Günther Orban, in those days he was rector of Aachen University, with us, and he was the one who made all this possible, and therefore I especially want to dedicate this lecture to him today. Last year he became 85, and we wish him all that in many, many years will be with us and enjoy what we are doing. We were all young, and it happened to many of us. Maurizio told you were 23 when you started in your excavation.
Archaeology.
Carl, yeah?
Archaeology.
Yeah. So it's a wonderful feeling that as young people you get a chance to do something which is extraordinary, and it happened to us. So it was a good group of international experts who were working in Mohenjo-Daro, and our first task was to redocument this site, which seems to be the largest Bronze Age city of the world. And we discussed yesterday the size. If it would be 300 to 400 hectares, it might have had something like 100,000 people in 4,500 years ago. And that is what we say if we remember that, for example, the 10 Commandments with Moses is around 1500 BC. We have almost a double time ahead where we have the first urban civilizations, and law, order, whatever you can think of, has been already existing in those days. Otherwise, these large civilizations would not have been possible. And of course, coming from Aachen, we had latest innovation technology, and with Muki Bosemeyer, who even today runs hot air balloons, we constructed this hot air balloon which could carry about 50 kilograms with a camera, which we could control, and with which we took photographs which were famous. And we have, of course, our friends already in those days, Maurizio to the left here. We have George Dales with Barbara Dales from Berkeley University, and we all gathered in Aachen, and in those days Aachen was a hub of new innovative movements. Stratigraphies of mind. And this was something which, with our dear friend Peter Gerlach, and he's sitting around the corner there, where we did semiotics. Semiotics, thinking communication system. What is communication? What happens in your thinking? And we identified Mortimer Wheeler. Here you see different archaeologists who in the 40s and 50s interpreted this culture in a specific way. And what we found out, you have in archaeology, also from the strata, two different stratigraphies. The one is the physical one, in archaeology or in geology, where you control the layers and study what is happening where, and in your mind. And the stratigraphies of your mind, of course, are directly reflected in what you are and what you have experienced. And every event is settling down in your brain. So at the end, you have an enormous knowledge and experience of what you have been as a personality. And these two things come together once you want to understand archaeology in the prehistoric context, where you only have material remains to be interpreted. And here we have the physical recording and the interpretation. And this is a very complex system which is permanent, moving. And I think we can say that with the Aachen research, we have contributed a little bit in having made clear that Mohenjo-Daro as a site was not, as Wheeler anticipated, coming and traveling as an idea from Mesopotamia, but it was an individual indigenous development within the area, which of course was proved by the famous excavation of Jean-François Jarich in Merga. So documentation, three-dimensional topographies, and what you see here are the different excavated areas which today still are known. A famous, I don't go too much into detail, wells. We have more than 600 wells as a water supply system in the city, unique in the world. In the Middle Ages of Europe, you have had maximum 2 or 3 wells. This was an enormous investment to construct, and we even do not know today what was the actual reason behind. A gigantic site constructed of burnt bricks to nowadays standards, a very modern, if we might say so, modern society where houses had a high standard, the quality of living was very high. The only indications for religious, sacred belief forms were seals which depict some scenes which we discussed yesterday and today again. And here the famous priest king, the so-called priest king, a figure which is not bigger than 20 centimeters. No monumentality at all. We do not know, and we cannot identify neither temples nor palaces in this civilization, while Egypt had pyramids, had the pharaoh as a god, king. We have the very complex development in Mesopotamia, and here cities, structures, only built out of one element for the round, for the rectangular, for staircases, and so on. You see the houses, very densely populated areas, which seem to be quite a modern conception. So the Aachen project was primarily dealing with restudying the architecture. You see one of our photographs and the excavation areas of the 20th, typology of houses, chronology, stratigraphies, how did the people live. All these, of course, are questions which one has to raise. And, of course, the evaluation of the original. I will show you a few photographs. So nowadays we have a large site atlas with all information about the conditions. I don't go too much in detail. The red ones are highly endangered structures. The yellow ones partly reconstructed. This is an important information because, of course, architecture has got a primary source, background where the expert can read in and can tell the history of the structures themselves. One of the major discoveries we made was that Mohenjo-Daro, as it seems, was built on an elevated platform. Here is an excavation by Wheeler, 1950. It goes 6 meters down, and in the lowest levels we still have anthropogenic material. That means the whole surrounding of Mohenjo-Daro was 4,500 years, 6 meters lower. We did strippings, and we could find a gigantic mud brick platform all around the citadel. That means it seems to have been that while in Egypt 10,000 people for 10 years they were working to construct the pyramids, here 10,000 people were working to construct a protective platform against the floods, to make 40,000, 50,000 people perhaps in the beginning living in the same condition. And you see how the same labor investment goes into different directions. And what was fascinating, that the earliest 3 civilizations not only had each individual writing without connection, almost at the same time, but also completely different social, political, and sacred behavior. The big change, and we have to understand the history of mankind as steps where major things happen, Wellengeschehnisse, threshold events. And one of them was, like 10,000 BC, the change from gatherer and hunter to farmer and cattle breeder. The 3rd millennium, of course, the invention of writing, but also the change from land transport, systematic change, to the water transport. And here we have a depiction of a boat of the 3rd millennium. And here is a kind of assuming a reconstruction of Mohenjo-Daro. I was there 2 years ago when we had the big floods. I show you some photos of that. So these alluvial river systems are gigantic and dangerous, and only in the very last moment of the development of village life, people made it to come close to the river system. Here a very old map of the Indus Valley, but you see the enormous extent along the river with higher concentrations in Saurashtra, Gujarat. We learned last week in Paris on another conference that enormous concentrations are here in Haryana, and we're very pleased to have the Assistant Director General of India in Delhi here, who gave us some more information about these events. We have, of course, now the satellite communication, and there was a big UNESCO project to save it. You see here the Indus and the dams, which 2 years ago withstood the floods, and no major breaches took place. Another very important structure is the so-called stupa, which is a sacred building in Buddhism. And since latest we are speculating, that means we know now already that this also belonged to the Harappan period as a kind of monumental architecture. The first summary for the first stratum of my mind, we have triangular relation, a triadic relation, and we see the three big civilizations of the world. This is profane power, elite power, and sacred power, and every civilization can be identified with another pattern of power systems which were running these societies. Here is a picture of 2 years ago where we have people saving their household goods from the floods. You all have heard of that. And I'm also pleased to announce it, you will see it in the exhibition down here. Since a few years, I'm with the Rotarians in Aachen. We have a project together with the Pfarrer St. Gregorovius, where we have been building in a village from our workers who have been working with us, a school for girls who are taught English now and who get computers so that they are able to communicate. And being now an old man, and after 40 years working there, and we have spent 20 millions of US dollars in the UNESCO project for the saving of the bricks, I come across the understanding that the poor people living around Mohenjo-Daro are more important than the site itself. So, I mean, this is something one has to learn after a long life. And I change now to another project which I want to show you. We had through UNESCO in the beginning of the 90s a big project in Central Asia, the Ultra Oasis at the Amu Darya. We are geographically, we are here, the Aralsee, this is the Amu Darya, about here. It's this Central Asian region, it's fantastic. We had yesterday and today reports on the development from the earliest times, and we had the chance to do a 6 years project, and I have to explain that in Aachen we moved from pure research in archaeology to project management and conservation, and since then we have done lots of projects for UNESCO and also for the German government, which I will show you now. So Ultra-Tobe, you see here is the river meandering, and close by about here, I never have seen in my life, I have seen a lot, such an oasis structures with cities which nobody normally can think of being in the middle of the Central Asian world. So again, here's the satellite photograph, and you see the meandering discourse here, which are here, and we have Ultra-Tobe here. Ultra is a gigantic oasis with irrigation systems, which developed very, very large cities. From the satellite you see still the ancient irrigation patterns in the ground, and the Russians, during the Russian period, raised cotton wool here. This city is known also out of history because the Mongols, Genghis Khan, conquered it in the 13th century and destroyed it, and it was rebuilt after that again, and it consists of a gigantic upper city, and our responsibility was with UNESCO, with the Japan Trust Fund, to do a conservation project of the mosque, capacity building to train young people, and you see already here the main Tobe, the hill about 18 meters high, artificially erected. Again, an enormous investment of labor, that's about 800 meters, 800 by 800 by 50. You can calculate how many cubic meters of earth have to be moved. And we had an ultralight aeroplane, and you see here the citadel, the excavation was done by the Russians, by Karl Baykov, who is from Kazakhstan, and another phenomenon which was completely new to me. And nowadays, of course, look at these gigantic mounds. These are part of the Silk Road project. And you may have heard that there is an attempt to have the Silk Road as a serial nomination on the World Heritage List, starting with the Mediterranean and ending up in Xi'an. Of course, a very ancient route along which knowledge traveled, goods were traveling, and where Marco Polo, of course, in the 13th century traveled, and which was stopped in 1453 when Constantinople was conquered by the Turks. And since then, the Mediterranean access to the east was cut off, which was one of the reasons why Columbus tried to reach India in sailing west, and where he discovered America, and Vasco da Gama discovered the sea route to India. Now these tours are rather unknown, not very much research in it. We know approximately the stratigraphies, and the Russian excavations were not very good in the documentation. And what we did from Aachen was that we recorded these tours three-dimensionally, and one of my colleagues, Mario Santana, who has been there, was with us, and we did through the total station in those days, the latest technology, the three-dimensional reconstruction of the site. And you see the mosque here, where with ICOMOS help we did conservation and capacity building and national training. So here, for those who know him, Karl Bakov, the former excavator, and Yamauchi from Japan, and other colleagues who were working there in the field. Not far away from Otratube is a little town, Turkestan, and in this Turkestan is a gigantic mausoleum, late 14th century. It's the mausoleum of Hoja Ahmed Jabasi, who is buried under this dome. And this is Timurid architecture. And you may know that after Genghis Khan, who was in the 13th century, after some generations, we had Timur, who again came from the east, in those days then already as Muslims, and who created this enormous architecture. And this is an unknown example of a wonderful piece of architecture which had 1395, which had consequences. And you know Samarkand as one of the fantastic architectural centers of Timur, and here we are in Herat in Afghanistan, and we have Mrs. Hahn from UNESCO here. She was in charge of that, and you see here the mausoleum, and also Mario documented it, where we have this dome. It's the burial of one of the family from Timur, and it is from that point of view interesting as it has a triple dome inside. Here you see the documentation we did. A little problem was that the dome was wrongly conserved in cement, and the mortar was a gypsum mortar. So of course this does not work, and the whole conception had to be redone, and documentation was done by our colleague Tarsis Stevens. And you see now inside this fantastic, this is 1420, this fantastic conception of the inner dome, then a second kind of dome, which was a supporting system of supporting walls, which carried the third dome, which makes this very strange form understandable. And of course, this was one of a long chain of events, and finally, of course, and here we only have two domes, we have it in one of the most famous architectures in the world, the Taj Mahal, around 1620 in India, constructed by Shah Jahan. So this started in Central Asia, and the influence was from the Timurid. Herat itself, in Afghanistan, another project where we have been working. You see the city here, and it's supposed to be an Alexandrian founding. What is very strange for Islamic cities is the cross, of course, which resembles Mediterranean architecture, and we have the Musalla complex, a special complex outside here, which also for UNESCO is a big problem. Here you see a view on the mosque, So this is also under Timurid influence, of course. And you have these single towers in the Musalla complex. One of them is leaning, and it should be prepared now for the World Heritage Program. At the beginning of September, we have a big meeting in Turin to discuss these matters. Another very famous tower in which we are also involved is the Jam Minaret. It's buried. The problems here, and we have also experts from Aachen, from civil engineering, being involved. It's leaning and more than 60 meters high. So the question is, what can we do? We have done, out of latest stereophotogrammetric recording, a three-dimensional topographic survey to identify the core and the buffer zone, as this is a World Heritage Monument, to keep the outstanding universal value. In 2002, we were the first ones who had a chance to go to Bamiyan. Professor Petzet, in those days world president of ICOMOS, and colleagues from the Afghan survey, we took a special plane of UN and went in those days, just half a year after the defeat of the Taliban, to the Bamiyan Valley. And of course, Bamiyan is our project in which we still are active, where we started in 2002. Here you see one of the niches, the empty Buddha niches, which, as you know, the Buddhas which were blown up in 2001. And here still a Russian tank which was shot down in front of one of the niches. The Bamiyan Valley, 2,500 meters high, is one of the most beautiful valleys I ever have seen, with still an intact cultural landscape, with irrigation systems which are feeding the fields, which are nowadays they grow potato, wheat, and a very moderate climate with poplar trees along the channels. And this is one more aspect of UNESCO to keep this cultural landscape as it is. Close by is a site which is also on the World Heritage List. It is Shar-e-Gogola. Now I'm a little bit, it does not do what I want. Shar-e-Gogola is an Islamic city which also was destroyed by Genghis Khan. And what we do there is to make a damage assessment. So with the, of course, destruction through the Russians, through the Taliban, in Afghanistan, many monuments have suffered, and it is one of the UNESCO attempts to revitalize these monuments. And we have, I will show you later, one big event in 2013, Ghazni, capital of the Ghaznavids, will be cultural capital of Islam. But here you see again the niches. So these projects consist of two components. One is to stabilize the niches, and the question is, you may have read in the newspaper, should we rebuild the Buddha figures themselves? In Aachen we have made a three-dimensional reconstruction, like an envelope, and then we invented together with the University of Cologne a method where we can replace the blown up rock pieces. One can measure the back wall stratigraphically. It's a sediment system where you can very clearly see the different sediments, and you can geomagnetically measure it. And if you take a rock, it has the same stratigraphic context as the back wall. So with the reading of the geomagnetic system and the reading of the strata, you can place the rock in the height from where it is coming. I told you, technology, with the slides it would have been much more easy. Okay, so there are some slides missing, but this is not too bad. Coming from the Buddha figures, which should have been shown here, we make a jump into the Gandhara culture of northwest Pakistan. And you know, 2 years ago, now 2008 it was, 4 years already, we had the big exhibition in the Bundeskunsthalle on the Gandhara culture. Here you see the area north of Peshawar, a city which is often in the newspapers. This was the center during the 80s, during the fight against the Russians, where the Taliban were trained and where high political events took place. And you go here into the north, you have the Swat Valley, beautiful valley in the mountains, where you have a high concentration of Buddhist monasteries. And I don't know what is happening. Das ist der So, of course I have a normal laptop, and this is a Mac, I believe. So, okay, I have to look. The Buddhist art is wonderful. It's a meeting point in the Gandhara art of Alexander the Great, who in the 3rd century BC, as you know, conquered whole Persia and came to, in those days, the eastern edge of the world, which was the Indus. And from the other side, the movement of Buddha, who tried to overcome and who overcame Hindu static thinking. These two elements met somewhere in the Gandhara area, which is close to the Indus, and a wonderful art developed, which is the Buddhist or the Gandhara art, where for the first time Buddha was depicted. And of course, that is too far. I just can show you the headline, Mess Einer. Nobody knows what is Mess Einer. But Mess Einer is the most exciting place I ever have seen. And you will read about this in the near future, because what is happening? Afghanistan is very rich. It has enormous mineral sources, and a very big one, metal, copper, is south of Kabul. It is this area of Mess Einer. And in the 70s, they found in the middle of this copper mining area a wonderful city of the 4th century AD with a Buddhist temple, with Buddha figures, with a city, and with mining areas 1500 years ago. Now what happened? The Afghans sold the right to take the copper to China. So China has constructed a big camp for 2,000 laborers, and they want now to have the copper, to smelt it and to make money. And suddenly the whole world is crying up and saying, no, you cannot destroy this Buddhist temple and this city. I was 2 weeks ago there. The World Bank has given 10 million to save the site. And at the moment there are big, big struggles of what to do with this wonderful place, which has definitely qualities of the World Heritage, as you can see. It's almost the last step and stratum of my mind. It is Ghazni, cultural capital of Islam. It's a small city about 150 kilometers south of Kabul, in an area where already a lot of Taliban activities takes place. We are not allowed to go by car, it's too dangerous. And we had the idea to contribute to Afghanistan, to the peace process, in helping them to conserve a 1,500-meter long city wall, 15 meter high, 800 years old, and that is a project which we presented to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they were generous enough to give us the money. And meanwhile, the project has started. The story, at least from the western side, starts about 150 years ago, when the British, in 1839, tried to conquer Afghanistan. They were already sitting in the areas of Lahore, the northwestern part of the Indus, and they sent a little army of about 5,000 people through the Bolan Pass up to Afghanistan. And the first city they conquered was Ghazni. I hope I can show you now. One of I have to tell you. And this city was conquered. The British moved to Kabul. In Kabul, they conquered. So long before the Europeans, who were sailing around Africa, with the discovery of the sea route to India, went to China. The Omanis had already sailing connections to China, from where they traded the porcelain, the silk, the incenses, whatever it was, and brought them to the Mediterranean world through Constantinople and Venice. Not working? I continue. Anyway. Okay.
Michael, you're being redeemed. The man who invented Apple is off.
Okay, some last words. It's not so important, we do it another time. So we have this new university in which our dear colleague Raoult is rector, and they had just now, and I see Wolf Westerheide, the dean of the faculty there, they just had the first bachelors who passed, so the first success of this university with Höhler and partner, who unfortunately are not here. They have constructed a gigantic university building, a new one. I would have liked to have shown it to you, in which now from autumn onwards new classes start and an expansion can take place. And we had the big pleasure and honor through the owner of this university, Sheikh Abdallah Al-Salmi, to be invited to join this system and to open a new research center in Indian Ocean. And most probably from autumn onwards we will shift whatever is at the Faculty of Architecture, which is mine. We shifted to Oman, and we will start new conceptions of research. We hope that we keep the connection to the Faculty of Architecture, to my alma mater, in which I have been teaching now, I don't know how many years, with great pleasure, and having a vision for the future, maybe for any or people of you who want to join us there, to have this exciting life of researching, studying, and being neugierig, being curious every day, to experience something new and never stop working, at least with your brain, so that your stratigraphy of mind is added up and you have a rich experience for your life and for the future. I thank you all, everybody who has been accompanying me in the way I have been working, and I hope that we will have many, many happy events together in the future. Thank you very much.